Upon returning to Greenland, the story of Vinland took on a life of its own. The sagas, oral histories passed down by word of mouth before being committed to parchment, became the vessels through which the memory of Leif Ericson's voyage endured. These narratives blended observation with imagination, embedding the concrete discoveries, timber, grapes, fish-filled rivers, within a framework of legend that amplified the extraordinary nature of the journey. Vinland, in this telling, was more than land. It was a symbol of human curiosity, ambition, and the unrelenting drive to explore. The saga writers were attentive to both detail and drama. In recounting Vinland, they emphasized the lushness of the land, the abundance of natural resources, and the strategic importance of timber and arable soil. Yet they also chronicled the perils, the hostility of the Skraelings, the unpredictability of the Atlantic, and the fragility of life on foreign shores. This narrative duality created a compelling story that conveyed practical knowledge for future voyagers, while also capturing the imagination of audiences far removed from Greenland's icy coastlines. As Vinland stories spread, they became a touchstone for Norse identity. The tales highlighted traits valued in Norse culture: courage, resilience, ingenuity, and the ability to navigate both the physical and social challenges of new lands. Listeners learned that exploration was not merely about the act of discovery, but about endurance, negotiation, and the ethical and strategic considerations necessary to survive in contested territories. The sagas reinforced a moral dimension. Ambition without prudence could lead to loss, while skillful adaptation and respect for circumstances could turn peril into opportunity. The sagas preserved vivid images: the lush forests of Vinland, the wild grapes staining the hands of men, the salmon leaping in crystal-clear rivers, all became enduring motifs. Equally, the tension-filled skirmishes with the Skraelings illustrated the complexities of encountering foreign peoples and the delicate balance between cooperation and conflict. In weaving these elements together, the sagas ensured that Vinland's memory was not static. It was a dynamic narrative that could instruct, inspire, and entertain simultaneously. Over time, Vinland occupied a liminal space between myth and history. For those in Greenland and Iceland, the tales were a source of pride and wonder. They confirmed that the Norse had crossed the Atlantic, a feat of extraordinary seamanship, and that fertile lands existed beyond their northern frontiers. Yet to those unfamiliar with the Atlantic world, the story of Vinland often seemed fantastical, a blend of truth and legend that challenged conventional geography. The sagas thus functioned both as cultural memory and as a literary device, preserving the essence of exploration while leaving room for embellishment. In addition to their cultural significance, the sagas conveyed practical knowledge. Future expeditions could learn from the recorded experiences of Leif Ericson and his crew. The importance of preparing provisions, the need for vigilance in foreign lands, and the value of establishing defensive positions when confronted by unfamiliar peoples. These lessons, encoded within narrative form, bridged the gap between generations, ensuring that the wisdom gleaned from Vinland remained accessible and influential. Vinland's representation in memory and saga also influenced Norse conceptions of the wider world. It expanded the cognitive map of explorers and settlers, suggesting that the Atlantic was not a void, but a corridor of opportunity. The Norse imagination, already attuned to voyages across seas and fjords, now included the possibility of distant, fertile continents awaiting discovery. Vinland thus became a catalyst for envisioning the limits of known geography and the potential for expansion, trade, and cultural contact across vast distances. The enduring fascination with Vinland also reflected a human desire to reconcile experience with aspiration. The Norse who returned carried stories not just of conquest and survival, but of the tension between ambition and limitation. Vinland was rich and promising, yet contested and fragile. The sagas captured this paradox, offering a narrative in which success was measured not solely by permanence or conquest, but by knowledge, experience, and the preservation of life. The memory of Vinland thus became a meditation on the nature of exploration itself. Later, when the first European settlers reached the Americas centuries after Leif Ericson, Vinland's legacy offered a historical precedent. Though the Norse settlements did not endure, the idea that Atlantic crossings were possible and that lands teeming with resources awaited across the ocean had been firmly established in Norse consciousness. Vinland served as a quiet precursor to the age of exploration, a reminder that human curiosity and daring could precede even the most celebrated journeys of the later centuries. Part 16 concludes by emphasizing the dual nature of Vinland in Norse memory. It was simultaneously a physical place and a conceptual one. The forests, rivers, and grapes represented tangible discoveries. The sagas transformed these into enduring lessons about courage, adaptability, and prudence. Vinland's story, preserved in Saga, became a guide for future generations, a source of inspiration and a testament to the remarkable capacity of human beings to imagine, explore, and understand worlds beyond their immediate experience. Vinland's story, preserved through the sagas, offered more than tales of adventure. It became a repository of lessons about human endurance, strategy, and the delicate balance between ambition and pragmatism. Leif Ericson and his men had discovered fertile lands rich in resources, but the abundance of Vinland was counterbalanced by the complexities of survival and the presence of the Skrælings. These realities underscored a key insight. Discovery alone did not guarantee settlement, and courage had to be matched by strategy. The first lesson concerned the practicalities of survival in a new land. Vinland's rivers teemed with salmon, forests provided timber, and meadows offered pasturage. Yet these resources were finite, and their management required foresight. The Norse built shelters of turf and timber, constructed temporary defenses, and learned to forage, hunt, and fish in unfamiliar terrain. Their success depended on observation, adaptability, and a meticulous attention to detail. The sagas emphasize that exploration was not a single heroic act, but a sustained engagement with the environment, requiring careful planning and continuous labor. Equally important was the lesson of human relations. The encounters with the Skrælings revealed the complexities of cross-cultural interaction. Initial trade and curiosity gave way to conflict as misunderstandings and fear escalated. The Norse were armed, confident in their martial prowess, yet outnumbered and unfamiliar with the local terrain. The Skrælings, defending their homeland, exploited their knowledge of the land to challenge the Norse presence. These dynamics highlighted a fundamental truth. Power and resources alone could not secure permanence. Understanding, diplomacy, and respect for local realities were essential. The sagas also taught about the limits of expansion. Vinland was vast and rich, but the Norse contingent was small. 35 men, skilled and disciplined, could achieve remarkable feats, but they could not maintain control indefinitely against larger, determined populations. This tension between ambition and capacity became a central theme of Vinland's story. The Norse could claim knowledge, gather resources, and even temporarily occupy space. But long-term settlement required more than courage. It required sustainable numbers, alliances, and logistical support. Leif Ericson's leadership embodied this balance between aspiration and prudence. He recognized the value of Vinland, yet he also understood the risks. The decision to depart, laden with timber, grapes, and other resources, reflected strategic foresight. Survival, experience, and the transfer of knowledge to Greenland outweighed the desire for immediate conquest. Here, Vinland becomes a study in calculated risk. Knowing when to advance and when to retreat is as critical as the initial act of discovery. Another lesson concerned the human capacity to transform knowledge into legacy. Though the Norse did not establish a permanent colony, the stories of Vinland persisted, guiding imagination and future expeditions. The sagas conveyed information about geography, resources, navigation, and the presence of indigenous peoples. They taught that exploration created value even without conquest. Knowledge itself became a currency of human progress. Vinland also illustrated the interplay between environment and culture. The Norse adapted their methods, fishing, hunting, timber cutting, and temporary construction, to fit the ecological realities of North America. Yet they also brought cultural frameworks, social hierarchy, tools, techniques, and oral traditions. These elements allowed them to navigate challenges, make decisions, and establish temporary order. The sagas preserved this integration of cultural and environmental knowledge, showing that exploration demanded both practical skill and cultural competence. Conflict with the Skraelings underscored the enduring importance of ethical consideration in exploration. The Norse presence, though initially exploratory and trade-oriented, was perceived as invasive. The escalation to violence demonstrated how even well-intentioned engagement could result in unintended consequences. The sagas present these clashes as cautionary tales, emphasizing vigilance, negotiation, and the recognition of local agency as crucial elements for any successful venture into foreign lands. Finally, Vinland exemplified the psychological dimension of exploration. The mixture of hope, fear, exhilaration, and frustration experienced by Leif and his men shaped their decisions. The sagas capture these emotional states, illustrating that human exploration is not only about geography, but also about managing human morale, expectation, and resilience. Each day in Vinland demanded courage tempered by wisdom, ambition constrained by reality, and imagination balanced with pragmatism. Part 17 concludes by framing Vinland as a multifaceted lesson in survival, strategy, and human understanding. It was a land of abundance yet contested, a stage for both ingenuity and caution. The Norse experiences illustrate the essential balance between boldness and prudence, between ambition and capacity. Vinland's story, encoded in Saga, thus serves not only as a historical account, but also as a guide to the enduring principles of exploration. Respect for the land, attentiveness to people, careful planning, and the courage to know when to advance and when to retreat. In these lessons, Vinland's legacy transcends its temporal existence, offering enduring insights into the human endeavor of discovery. After weeks in Vinland, harvesting grapes, cutting timber, and observing the land's richness, Leif Ericson and his crew prepared for the return journey. The Nar, their sturdy cargo vessel, now carried the fruits of Vinland, literally and metaphorically, back across the Atlantic to Greenland. Though the settlement could not be maintained, the voyage home was no mere retreat. It was a deliberate act of preservation, carrying knowledge, resources, and experience to the northern settlements that would sustain Norse culture and imagination for generations. As the sails caught the northern winds, the men reflected on the challenges they had faced. Every clash with the Skraelings, every day of hunting or fishing, had tested their skill and endurance. Their small force had been enough to establish a temporary foothold, but not to secure permanent dominance. Leif, ever the pragmatic leader, had weighed each decision. The allocation of men for exploration, the storage of provisions, and the negotiation or avoidance of conflict. The return voyage embodied the Norse ethos of survival, intertwined with exploration. Courage tempered by caution. Navigation back to Greenland required the same careful observation that had guided them westward. The North Atlantic, while a pathway, was unpredictable and formidable. Crews monitored the sun, stars, and migratory birds, noting patterns in the wind and current. Icebergs and storm clouds were constant reminders of the ocean's power. The return journey demanded vigilance, cooperative labor, and unwavering attention to the rhythms of the sea. The sagas recount nights of intense watchfulness, when every sound of the wind or wave might indicate danger, and every glance at the horizon brought both hope and anxiety. The cargo they carried represented more than material wealth. Grapes, timber, and other gathered resources were tangible proof of Vinland's fertility, yet the knowledge accumulated about the land's geography, flora, fauna, and potential was perhaps more valuable. Leif's men had mapped the rivers, noted the forests, and catalogued the availability of game. These records would inform future expeditions, equipping the Norse with practical intelligence about lands far beyond the icy reaches of Greenland. During the voyage, stories of Vinland circulated among the crew. Tales of vast forests, streams teeming with salmon, and wild grapes that stained their hands became part of the oral tradition. These stories reinforced collective memory, embedding lessons of resourcefulness, caution, and appreciation for natural abundance. They reminded the Norse that the Atlantic was not a barrier, but a conduit connecting distant lands and peoples. The emotional tone of the return journey was complex. There was relief at leaving the precarious settlement behind, but also longing for the possibilities Vinland offered. Some men expressed frustration at being unable to establish a permanent colony. Others recognized the wisdom in returning with what they could safely carry. Leif's leadership during these moments was critical. By maintaining morale and emphasizing the strategic value of the voyage, he ensured cohesion among men who might otherwise have been divided by ambition, fear, or regret. Upon sighting Greenland's coastline, a sense of homecoming blended with triumph. The Nar entered familiar waters, bringing back more than timber or grapes. It carried stories, strategic knowledge, and proof that lands west of Greenland existed. These accounts would ripple through Norse society, influencing planning, settlement decisions, and future voyages. The return confirmed that Norse seafaring extended beyond mere survival. It was a deliberate act of discovery and information gathering, grounded in observation, skill, and courage. Back in Greenland, the resources and knowledge brought from Vinland were shared among settlers. Timber allowed repairs and construction. Grapes, though limited, were a novelty and symbol of distant abundance. Oral accounts of the Skraelings, topography, and ecology informed the community, ensuring that the lessons of Vinland extended beyond those who had sailed west. The experience became part of the collective consciousness, influencing Norse understanding of the Atlantic world and their place within it. The sagas emphasized that this return voyage was as critical as the outward journey. Without safe passage back and careful management of resources and information, Vinland's discoveries could have been lost to the sea. Leif's prudence, combined with the crew's skill, ensured that knowledge endured, laying the groundwork for future exploration, even if permanent settlement proved impossible at the time. In essence, Part 18 highlights the significance of memory, reflection, and strategic retreat. Vinland was not conquered in the traditional sense. It was experienced, documented, and respected. The return voyage represents the Norse ability to integrate adventure with prudence, to recognize when to claim a moment and when to preserve it for posterity. By bringing Vinland home in cargo and memory, Leif Ericson ensured that the Atlantic had been crossed not just physically, but intellectually and culturally, embedding the knowledge of new worlds into Norse society for generations to come. Upon returning to Greenland, the tale of Vinland spread rapidly among the Norse communities. Word of forests teeming with timber, rivers brimming with salmon, and wild grapes that ripened in abundance captured imaginations. Even those who had never ventured west listened in awe to the accounts, passing the stories from settlement to settlement, from Iceland to Norway. Vinland became more than a distant shore. It became a symbol of possibility, adventure, and the vastness of the world beyond the known seas. Leif Ericson himself became a figure of legend. His prudence in navigating both the Atlantic and the complexities of Vinland's settlement earned him respect and admiration. Among the Greenlanders, he was celebrated not only as an explorer, but as a strategist who balanced courage with caution. His decisions to explore, to harvest, to engage cautiously with the Skraelings, and ultimately to retreat, set a precedent for measured expansion. Leif's experience demonstrated that exploration was as much about understanding limits as it was about pushing boundaries. The stories of Vinland did more than entertain. They informed practical knowledge, guiding future expeditions. Crews learned from Leif's observations where to find fresh water, which berries were edible, the behavior of local game, and potential hazards in unfamiliar landscapes. Tales of the Skraelings, their movements and their methods of conflict informed Norse expectations of encounters with indigenous peoples. Even failed settlement attempts provided valuable lessons on population requirements, defense strategies, and resource management for distant colonies. Among the broader Norse population, Vinland came to represent both ambition and caution. It symbolized the allure of new worlds and the challenges inherent in claiming them. While the land was rich and promising, the Norse learned that numbers, alliances, and knowledge of local populations were critical for sustainable settlement. These lessons would echo in later voyages, shaping attitudes toward expansion and contact with other peoples across the North Atlantic. Vinland also entered the cultural imagination through sagas. The saga of the Greenlanders and the saga of Eric the Red meticulously recorded events, blending fact and narrative to preserve history for future generations. Through these stories, Vinland became a part of Norse heritage, a testament to the daring, resilience, and ingenuity of those who dared to sail beyond familiar horizons. The sagas immortalized not just Leif's achievements, but the collective experience of the crew, the hardships, triumphs, and moral choices they faced on foreign shores. Despite the legend, Vinland remained elusive. Its location, relative to Greenland and Iceland, was described in terms that could be interpreted in various ways, leaving future generations to debate precise geography. Some explorers ventured west, inspired by these accounts, but logistical challenges and hostile encounters limited permanent colonization. Yet, the very idea that the Atlantic could be crossed, that new lands lay beyond known maps, planted the seeds for a mindset of exploration that would resonate centuries later during the Age of Discovery. Vinland's legacy extended beyond Norse communities. It challenged prevailing assumptions about Europe's reach, the limits of navigation, and the scale of the known world. Though largely forgotten by medieval Europe outside Scandinavia, its story resurfaced through archaeological evidence centuries later, confirming what the sagas had long claimed. Norsemen had indeed set foot on North American soil long before Columbus. Moreover, Vinland highlighted the interplay between ambition and respect for the unknown. The Norse experienced both the bounty of unclaimed resources and the reality of encountering established populations. The Skraelings, who had initially engaged in cautious trade and later defended their territory, reminded the Norse and future generations that discovery comes with ethical and practical considerations. Encountering other peoples required diplomacy, caution, and recognition of sovereignty, lessons as relevant then as they are today. In the domestic sphere, Vinland's stories inspired songs, oral histories, and moral reflections. Parents recounted Leif's journey to children, emphasizing bravery, wisdom, and prudence. Communities celebrated the achievements while acknowledging the risks and sacrifices involved. These narratives fostered a culture that valued exploration as a disciplined, purposeful endeavor, not merely a pursuit of wealth or glory. Ultimately, Part 19 emphasizes the enduring legacy of Vinland as both history and myth. It shaped Norse understanding of the world, provided practical knowledge for future ventures, and inspired imagination across generations. Vinland demonstrated that human curiosity, tempered by experience and respect for limits, could expand the horizons of civilization. Though the land itself would not become a permanent Norse colony, its story remained a guiding star in the narrative of exploration, preserving the memory of those who first dared to cross the Atlantic in search of new worlds. As centuries passed, the story of Vinland persisted, woven into the fabric of Norse culture and eventually rediscovered by historians and archaeologists. Leif Ericson's voyage, once whispered around the hearths of Greenland and Iceland, became emblematic of human daring and the timeless urge to explore beyond known boundaries. Vinland, though fleetingly occupied, stood as proof that the Atlantic had been crossed long before Columbus, challenging traditional narratives of discovery and reshaping our understanding of early contact between Europe and the Americas. Archaeological evidence, most notably at Lanceau Meadows in Newfoundland, confirmed what the sagas had recounted. Turf houses, iron tools, and remnants of Norse craftsmanship revealed a tangible footprint of the Vinland expeditions. These findings transformed legend into history, connecting centuries of storytelling with material proof. Scholars could now trace the roots, speculate on the daily lives of the settlers, and understand the challenges they faced in an unfamiliar world. The discovery validated the courage, skill, and vision of Leif Ericson and his crew, while offering insights into the interplay of human ambition and environmental realities. Vinland's significance extends beyond historical curiosity. It illustrates the intersection of exploration, survival, and cultural exchange. The Norsemen's encounters with the Skrælings, though often fraught with tension, highlight early instances of intercultural interaction in the Atlantic world. These encounters were the first steps in a complex dialogue between European settlers and the indigenous peoples of North America, a dialogue shaped by trade, conflict, and the negotiation of space and resources. Vinland serves as a reminder that exploration is not merely about geography, but also about relationships and responsibilities. The story of Vinland also resonates with themes of resilience and adaptability. The Norse faced harsh seas, unknown lands, and formidable opponents, yet their ingenuity allowed them to survive, even temporarily. They built homes from the land itself, navigated by the stars and sunstones, and harvested resources with skill and foresight. Though they ultimately retreated, their experience embodies a balance between aspiration and prudence, a lesson that extends to explorers and adventurers of every era. Culturally, Vinland influenced Norse identity and storytelling. It became a benchmark for heroism, demonstrating the rewards of courage tempered with wisdom. Saga writers preserved not just the events, but the moral lessons embedded within them. The value of foresight, the necessity of respect for other peoples, and the enduring human drive to seek out new horizons. Vinland's tale was retold in feasts, family gatherings, and schools of thought, embedding exploration as a virtue in the collective Norse consciousness. In a broader historical context, Vinland foreshadowed the age of exploration. The Norse voyages demonstrated that transatlantic travel was possible, challenging assumptions about the limits of medieval navigation. These early expeditions planted the conceptual seeds that would later inspire European explorers, providing both technical insights and proof of distant lands ripe for settlement. In this sense, Vinland was a prelude to centuries of maritime discovery, a testament to the human capacity to expand knowledge and embrace the unknown. Vinland's legacy is also symbolic. It represents the tension between abundance and limitation, between desire and prudence. The land offered immense potential, fertile soil, forests, rivers and grapes, but human factors, including the small size of the Norse population and the presence of indigenous peoples, constrained permanent settlement. This duality reflects a universal truth, that exploration and conquest are always balanced by environmental, social and logistical realities. Ultimately, Vinland's enduring gift lies in imagination. It invites us to consider the courage required to leave home, the vision needed to chart unknown waters, and the humility necessary when faced with forces beyond control. Leif Ericson and his crew became avatars of human curiosity, embodying the restless drive to discover, to learn, and to engage with the wider world. Their story, preserved in saga, soil, and scholarly study, continues to inspire those who gaze across oceans, mountains, and frontiers, reminding us that every horizon is a promise, and every journey a story waiting to be told. Vinland was more than a fleeting settlement. It was a testament to human daring, adaptability, and imagination. Though the Norse could not hold it, the memory of Vinland endured, etched into history and legend alike. It remains a symbol of what lies beyond known borders, a call to adventure, a lesson in prudence, and an enduring inspiration for all who dare to dream of lands yet unseen. In the grand narrative of exploration, Vinland occupies a unique place, not merely as a historical footnote, but as a timeless reminder that the spirit of discovery transcends time, culture, and geography.